Good evening. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Jung-min. We begin this evening with the budget proposed by the Yoon administration for next year. The government has kept the spending increase at the lowest level in almost 2 decades. This as the nation continues to tighten its belt and shifts away from previous expansionary stance, while promising to spend more for marginalized people. Our business correspondent Shin Ha-young joins me in the studio. Welcome, Ha-young.
Good evening, Jung-min.
So, Ha-young, the government's budget proposal for 2024, what were the major shifts and takeaways?
Well, Jung-min, for this year's budget, Yoon administration focused on building a solid foundation for fiscal soundness. And while continuing with this theme for next year's budget as well, it has also focused on improving the country's financial structure. Let's take a listen.
우리 정부는 경제 체질을 시장 중심 민간 주도로 바꿔 민간이 더 활발하게 투자하고 지출하고 일자리를 만들어내는데 역점을 둘 것입니다. 이를 위해 민간 투자를 저해하는 킬러 규제를 과감하게 철폐하고 민간의 자금이 흘러갈 수 있도록 금융 시스템을 정비할 것입니다.
In order to do so, South Korea will continue to tighten its belt. The government on Tuesday proposed a budget bill for next year of 656.9 trillion Korean won, or around $495 billion at the current rate. And it's an increase of 2.8% from this year's budget, the smallest on-year increase since top-down budgeting was first introduced in 2005. And also, the government has gone through major spending reforms in order to secure an extra $17 billion of funds for use in the budget. Seoul's finance ministry said the newly secured funds will be used to stabilize people's livelihoods and for public safety.
No matter how difficult the financial conditions may be, investing in areas such as protecting the socially vulnerable, ensuring public safety, and preparing for a better future cannot be neglected.
Then, Ha-young, what does the government have in mind as key priorities for next year's budget?
Well, Jung-min, the centerpiece of the bill is some $14.6 billion allocated to bolster the welfare system for the socially vulnerable. This includes increasing the maximum basic living allowance for low-income families to approximately $1,400 per month. And that's $160 more compared to this year and more than the total increase implemented by the previous administration. And as a response to the aging society issue, the government has increased the number of jobs for senior citizens to 1 million, which is approximately 10% of their elderly population, and marks a record high increase of 147,000. And it has also increased senior employment allowance by 7%. Those allowances has been frozen since 2018. And the budget bill will also be used to provide counseling and training to motivate and encourage the so-called NEET tribe in South Korea. NEET is an acronym for Not Currently Engaged in Education, Employment, or Training. And it is also planning to introduce a transportation card called K-Pass in July next year, which will reduce the burden of transit expenses for young people by 30% or more than $245 per year. And the Yoon administration will also spend some of the budget on dealing with the country's low birth rate. Under the 2024 budget, parents with newborns will be eligible for up to 1 million won, or around $750 per month in parental allowance beginning next year. And also to achieve a balance between work and childcare, the period of paid childcare leave, in this case for both maternity and paternity leave, will be extended for the first time since 1995 from 12 months to 18 months.
And are there any new changes that Korean business and industry should pay attention to? And also, what's in store for next year's tax revenue?
Well, financial support for AI, biotech, and cybersecurity, and as well as South Korea's digital platform government, which connects data across the private and public sectors, will be expanded from the current $2.7 billion to $3.3 billion to help advance the service industry. And also, in terms of cultural content exports and securing intellectual property rights, the government will be investing more than twice as much compared to this year. Take a listen.
Amid the heating up of OTT platform competition around the world to promote cultural content exports and secure intellectual property rights, we will expand policy financing from 800 billion won to 1.8 trillion won, more than double, by establishing a new K-content strategic fund.
Meanwhile, the budget has been designed to manage the increase in government debt by reducing expenditure growth.
Despite a decline in tax revenue, we mitigated the deterioration of the fiscal balance for the upcoming year by curbing the growth rate of total expenditure. We have also managed to control the increase in national debt, keeping it at its lowest level since 2019 at 61.8 trillion won, as part of efforts to establish a solid foundation for fiscal soundness.
And following a decline in national tax revenue, the figure for next year is projected to be roughly $278 billion, down 8% from this year. And the amount in tax exemption is expected to be increased by $5.7 billion from this year to a record high of $58 billion. And so falling tax revenue and rising tax exemptions have resulted in a tax exemption rate of 16.3%, which exceeds the legal limit by 2.3 percentage points. And that's the largest difference ever. And with next year's budget, South Korea's budget deficit to GDP ratio is forecast to be at 1.9%, worsening by 1.3 percentage points from this year. The total national debt to GDP ratio is expected to be 51% next year, up 0.6 percentage points from this year. And the government now plans to submit the final bill to the National Assembly on September 1st, and the legal deadline for National Assembly to pass the budget is December 2nd.
All right, thanks for your reporting, Ha-young.
Always my pleasure.